888-355-1615. That's 888-355-1615. Or go to www.amac.us/options.
With each breath, allergens, germs, and viruses get trapped in your nose. Now there's a simple, easy, and effective way to clean your nose and protect your health. It's called Navage. Available at Navage.com.
8:37. Team Hochberg Traffic Center time and Jim Telemonti.
I-55 has heavy delays northbound from 126 to 53 where a car fire blocks the left lane. More delays kick in around the Veterans Memorial Tollway. From there to DeSable Lakeshore Drive, it's 37 minutes. Outbound, the trip time is 38 minutes. Looking at traffic on the inbound Edens, 23 minutes. Lake Cook to Montrose, outbound 22. The Kennedy, 36 minutes. O'Hare to downtown, a tad quicker in the Express. Outbound, though, 40 minutes downtown to the airport. And on Eisenhower, 54 minutes, 390 to downtown, 40 from Wolf. Outbound 45 minutes to 390. Ryan is 22 minutes, 95th to downtown. Southbound Tri-State at the Waukegan Toll, a crash cleared. I'm Jim Telemonti on AM 560 The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. AM 560 Weather Center forecast. Partly sunny, more humid, 84. Humid and 70 overnight. Chance of thunderstorms tomorrow, especially in the afternoon, a high of 84. Currently 71. Next news at 9. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey.
From the Matrix Home Solutions studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. I'd rather have my kids' intellectual, social, and mental development hindered than be called a racist. I'd rather go along with my corporate culture, allow my career path to be limited than be called racist. So I'll just go along. Now I'd rather have the quality of health care that I have access to be degraded than be called a racist. Okay. It's funny, we laugh about it when stories like this one, the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine, which I am a member.
Of course. You're a leche lady, aren't you?
Urged the use of gender-inclusive language such as chest feeding, parent's milk, and human milk feeding in new guidelines because the ABM recognizes that not all people who give birth and lactate identify as female.
But I hope that they know men can't breastfeed.
They don't. And it's a funny story until you're in the medical profession and you're not allowed to tell the truth. You're not allowed to say what is biologically indisputable. And I'm not talking, you're not talking about, what's the band, Mother's Milk, with Flea.
You've had too many chicken tenders.
Come on.
What, the band, what, say it.
You're so, you're
I know I'm
you're
not
so culturally, illiterate that you can't take on my.
I don't know. Is there a band called Mother's Milk?
No, it's an album. Red Hot Chili Peppers, of course.
Well, gosh.
Honestly, please try to keep up. When I stumble, you're supposed to pick me up. So you have things like that. Then you have the disparate treatment of, say, Martin Kulldorff, friend of the show, Harvard Medical School professor, as compared to Washington football team head coach, Dr. quotation marks, Ron Rivera, former Bears linebacker.
I remember him. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Ron Rivera, his fact-free rants on vaccines get amplified by TMZ and then everywhere else. Sports Illustrated, then TMZ, then everywhere else. He's really upset about the bunch of misinformation one particular network is putting out about the vaccines, leading people to die. You got some effing a-holes that are putting a bunch of misinformation out there, leading people to die. It's frustrating to me. These people are allowed to have a platform. One specific news agency, every time they have someone on, I'm not a doctor, but the vaccines don't work. Or I'm not an epidemiologist, but the vaccines are going to give you a third nipple and make you sterile. Come on. That, to me, that should not be allowed. First of all, that's complete fabrication. That's not what happened. That's not what's happening on Fox News, which is what Rivera is obviously referring to. That's not happening on conservative talk radio. Nobody's saying anything of the sort. And certainly people like Martin Kulldorff aren't saying that. And yet Martin Kulldorff is suffering the same fate over at LinkedIn as Dr. Robert Malone, who's credited at least as one of the inventors of the mRNA vaccine technology. Got banned on LinkedIn, then reinstated. Kulldorff has had 2 of his posts removed
From LinkedIn?
for violating its misinformation policy. I mean,
He's a professor at Harvard Medicine.
Well, I know, but this is what's happening.
Doctor.
This is what's happening. And so it's funny when we're joking about chest feeding, men chest feeding, and then it's all part of the tapestry of the totalitarian. And it's happening in medicine, too. So nothing I won't surrender, including my life. Just don't call me a name. That's the culture. For more on this, pleased to be joined by John Murwaski. He's a reporter with Real Clear Investigations, and he's done a really good 2-part look at the impact of this sort of ideological orthodoxy in medical schools and healthcare as an industry. John, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on.
We've seen this throughout COVID. You have medical professionals have taken ridiculous positions, like, for example, in an era of social distancing and mask wearing, it was okay that those protesting the George Floyd murder were not social distancing, not wearing masks because their cause was righteous. So that's somehow the morality of what you're doing somehow relates to how a virus transmits. Medical doctors, epidemiologists saying things like that, in addition to the professional associations like the AMA, New England Journal of Medicine, taking up the matter of applying critical race theory and atonement to the medical profession.
That's correct. that is exactly what's happening. Is critical race theory is sweeping through medicine at a breakneck pace, and it's causing a certain amount of culture shock because critical race theory does things very differently than we did things before critical race theory. And the main goal of critical race theory is to redistribute power, wealth, and economic access to achieve equity. In other words, what they believe to be fair outcomes. Or equal outcomes or fair outcomes. And the problem right now with that is that for very complex reasons, some ethnic groups get better grades and better test scores than other ethnic groups. And so those measures of excellence or measures of ability need to be suspended to achieve equity in medicine, to bring in more black doctors. And the thinking behind that is that actually white doctors are causing harm to black patients not through any deliberate, not because they're secret Klansmen or anything like that, just because of what we've heard the term unconscious bias or implicit bias. And this has catastrophic events, actually catastrophic consequences, supposedly, for black patients. And there are hundreds of studies that keep on repeating this mantra. And so the medical profession is now, deciding that the solution in the George Floyd moment is we need to have an equal distribution of black doctors to treating black patients, or otherwise this is going to cause, irreparable harm to black patients. It's all very complex and controversial. And of course, many people don't agree with this, but this is sort of what is sweeping through the American Medical Association, and through the New England Journal of Medicine and the Journal of the American Medical Association and other very prestigious medical schools and medical journals. It's starting from the top. It's not bottom up. It's very much from the top down. It's a new elite worldview that you've talked about many times, and I've written about, and others have written about.
Yeah. Have any doctors pushed back? And if they have, has there been any consequences?
Yeah, a few doctors have pushed back. One doctor, who's a cardiologist at the University of Pittsburgh, published a paper basically disagreeing with affirmative action in medicine. He basically said it's illegal and it is discriminatory and it is ultimately counterproductive and not good for patients. And he was basically demoted. He was blocked from having access with students, with fellows and residents. And later they reversed the part about the ban on the students, so he can actually teach students, but he can't have contact with the fellows and the residents. And the thinking there is that his views are actually causing harm to the black and brown students. They're being harmed by this, by being exposed to this, because they're presuming that he's a bigot, and he's bringing these. If you oppose affirmative action, then of course you are a bigot. So only a bigot would oppose affirmative action, and so what they oppose is bigotry, except they just define bigotry in a completely different way than you and I probably oppose bigotry too, but we just define it differently. So their definition is very broad, and it captures a lot of behavior that presumably before would not have been considered bigoted. It just would have been a difference of opinion on a complex issue.
So the atonement piece, number of black doctors needs to be representative of the percentage of blacks in the population, so 13%. 13%.
13% is the average nationwide, right? But I mean, if you go to Washington D.C. or if you went to Detroit or certain,
majority.
cities that have a lot of, you might be over like 60 or 75%.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. And so, in order to get there, we may have to lower the MCAT scores and academic record and so on and so forth. Just because, as you said, it's complicated. There's a lot of reasons, but number one, there's just not that many. Relatively speaking, black Americans that go into medical school and then go on to careers in medicine. There are some, and there's great black doctors, just like great white doctors and Asian doctors and everybody else. But we want to, play games with the standards to achieve a racial mix. Okay, fine. So then,
so for example, they're eliminating honors programs, like Northwestern University Medical School, eliminating an honors program. There are three tests that you take in medical school, and three major exams that you take during the course of med school. And so the first one, they decided to make it just a pass-fail, to help, to lower the barrier a little bit to help. And the thinking behind that is that the test scores don't really measure your ability. What they really measure is how oppressed you've been. And so the reason that black people do worse on these tests is because they're living in poverty. And the reason they're living in poverty is because of systemic racism, and it's through no fault of their own that they find themselves in these conditions.
But that's dangerous to do. I mean,
it is. It is very. It raises a lot of. It can have a lot of downstream unintended consequences. And we don't know what those consequences are. Now, I think most people would agree that if you're a pediatrician, right? If you're a pediatrician, you're a mom, and you're going to send your infant to a pediatrician, you don't really care whether that pediatrician aced calculus, or whether that pediatrician, or whether she or he got a B or a C in calculus. So, in other words, there are certain standards. The medical school standards are very rigid and very high for everybody. But most of us probably think, well, it doesn't really matter. 20 years down the road, you're not going to ask your doctor, well, what was your grade in calculus before I allow you to examine my child? So some of these measures, we might even agree. All of us might agree that they don't measure, they don't tell us everything we need to know. But of course, with critical race theory, the changes are so sweeping and absolute and totalizing that, and they're being carried out at such a breakneck pace that no one seems to be stopping to think about the consequences, long-term consequences. The only this fixation is on getting to equity. And because we are underrepresented, we've got to sort of rejigger the system, morally rebalance society until we get to equity.
But critical race theory, critical race theory is sort of socio-political in its nature. The trans,
very much so.
The trans aspect is anti-biology in nature, and so marry the two. How trans plus critical race theory is, because we're focusing a lot on race, and that's certainly part of it. but this trans movement, per the American Breastfeeding Association and so many other examples, that celebrated medical professor at one of the Ivy Leagues who apologized to his students for essentially intimating that only women get pregnant. I mean, that has an impact on medicine too.
Yeah, where that comes from that comes out of French postmodernism and other Western ideas that have long been in circulation but never really entered the mainstream. And that is that social reality is constructed. That all of our understanding of the world, understanding of the universe, is basically a kind of almost like a figment of our imagination. These are social constructions. So gender, race, other things that we sort of thought were like rooted in biology are actually really socio-political worldviews. And, it makes more sense for race than for gender, but with gender and sex, you have to sort of remember we did evolve out of animals, and these animals did seem to have sex. So at one point we were if you buy into evolution, I think most people do that. At one point if we were primates, those primates are male and female, and they act like male. We don't really see any, gender fluidity in those creatures, or certainly in mice or birds or worms or amoeba. And suddenly, when we achieve human consciousness, then gender becomes something completely different. That's the tricky part of it. But yes, the idea is it is a social construction, and we can reconstruct these social ideas in such ways to achieve fair societies. That's the thinking behind it. But in order to do that, you have to basically make gender and sex disappear.
Well, I've got an idea then. I mean, just to fold in with the identitarians, and this grade school in Atlanta is way ahead of me. But black doctors treat black patients, white Catholic doctors treat white Catholic patients, trans doctors treat trans patients. We'll just segregate it. We don't need by law. We'll just do it culturally, like that school in Atlanta that has black teachers teaching black kids and white teachers teaching white kids.
Yeah, then I need a special doctor who changes his mind every day and undecided.
Right. Yeah, but I mean, this
indecision's great in the medical field.
But I tell you, I mean, and then for the patient, you take your chances based on who you think is getting preferential treatment based on their identity rather than their quality of education and academic record and performance as a resident and so on and so forth. You roll the dice. Your choice, your body, your choice. Your culture. For John Murwaski, reporter, RealClearInvestigations.com. I'll tweet out his two-part series on these issues we've been discussing. Very good, as always. John Murwaski, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. It's 2 parts and 3 articles, actually, in those 2 parts. But thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy using the AM 560